Breaking news as Donald Trump releases his new plan for the Gaza Strip and American relations with Israel.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for 100 years.
All right. And as you guys just witnessed with that groundbreaking clip, Trump has decided that, the U.S. is going to play more of a hands-on approach to not just Israel, Palestine, but specifically Gaza. So I guess with that, we're going to be covering all the breaking news on it, the history of the conflict, and everything in between. So, Darren, do you have any initial thoughts about, maybe the history of Gaza or how we got here or anything like that, or anything you just want to share that's, relevant here?
Well, I'll give my thoughts on how my thoughts have kind of changed, where I'm at right now regarding the conflict. I'm reading this book, The 100 Years War on Palestine, and I didn't finish it before this episode, but I was reading it in preparation for this episode, and it's just astounding how every step of the way the Palestinians have found themselves just against some of the most powerful forces in the entire world. So, starting with the British Empire, and then, later on after 1949, they found themselves, the Zionists found themselves more reliant on the U.S. And so as a consequence, the Palestinians found themselves against the U.S., which, alongside the Soviet Union, were the two dominant powers in the world in the post-war period. I've got to say, I just have such immense respect for the Palestinians, and in some ways, because even against these insurmountable odds, they really have not given up on this. There's this vocab word I learned from the book, irredentism. It's wanting back. It's wanting back the land that was previously yours, and the Palestinians are just the most unwavering irredentists, I guess you could call them. And, I'm reading the history, and I'm like, man, if only they would have just gone all out, before the 1920s, they could have fixed this problem. They could have solved it. They could have won, yeah, in hindsight, it's 2020.
Sure.
So that's obviously not fair for me to say, but I think my thoughts have changed a little bit, though, because while I do feel immense sympathy and respect for them for wanting back what is theirs, I've got to say, I mean, at some point, at what point do you just give up?
Right.
Because, I mean, and we might go into this later, but the amount that are dead is, in my opinion, likely in the multiple hundreds of thousands.
Right.
And if the fighting resumes, that's only going to go up more. So I know the land is just so valuable and so important, but at what point do you just say, we can't beat the forces arrayed against us? And I don't know, we'll be discussing it more later, but those are my thoughts. My kind of my starting thoughts of just immense sympathy and also respect. They have this martial spirit, and they don't They don't back down. So, you got to respect them, even if maybe perhaps, of course, I don't endorse all the tactics that have been used, but I don't endorse all the tactics of the Israeli side. What are your kind of like starting thoughts on the
Yeah,
conflict as a whole?
yeah, sure. And I'm definitely a little bit conflicted here, in some sense, because I do have great sympathies for the Palestinian people because by most every viewpoint, I think the land belongs to them. It is their land. There are people alive today who were there, and they were the original people exiled after the partition of Palestine by the United Nations in 1948.
Oh, yes,
And
yes.
these people are still alive, and that doesn't even begin to count all the people who have been exiled or displaced because of the settlement expansions in the West Bank, the pushing of people into Gaza. Also, I also understand though that there is like an ideological commitment by the leadership of the Palestinians, which is Hamas, and the Palestinian leadership that is Hamas is well, it's kind of a non-starter to negotiate with because their founding charter, it's pretty well known. They call for the complete annihilation of not just the state of Israel, but Jews as a whole. And when you're dealing with somebody who is that ideologically committed, like you can't negotiate with that. There is
Oh,
no
yeah, yeah.
there is no peace path. But I think that the part that gets comes close to representing all of the Palestinian people. And I think that the Palestinian people have been forced to side with Hamas because what other options do they have? You know?
Oh, I would agree. I would
And
agree.
like
Yes.
you said, I would not endorse by any means the tactics that Hamas used on October 7th or any of the previous attacks. I'm sure there was plenty of killing, plenty of rape, plenty of everything that is horrible and inhumane, and by all means, should be tried for war crimes, should be tried for basically every single crime with rules of engagement that you can think of. But that does not change the fact that at the end of the day, like you said, the government of Israel has likely killed people in the hundreds of thousands. And that doesn't even count the people who are injured but not dead. And that doesn't even count the people who indirectly died, right?
Oh,
Like
yes. Oh, yes.
the official number right now is 46,000, but the official number injured is already over 150,000, and that's according to the United Nations. And they're going to tell you, those are Hamas numbers. Those are Hamas numbers. Well, you know, okay, what do you place it as? And what number would be acceptable is my thing. You're talking about a population. They're roughly, depending on who you ask, either 2.2 or 1.6 million people, and 50% of them are under the age of 18. I mean, they dropped the equivalent of two nuclear bombs on Gaza.
Yeah.
Gaza is not a very big city. It's not a very big strip of land. So dropping the equivalent of two nuclear bombs, just for comparison, they've dropped, and I know we're getting a little too fast into this, and we'll back up here in a second. They've dropped 25,000 tons of explosives. That's the equivalent to two nuclear bombs.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of two London bombings during World War II. The entire German Blitz was 12,000 tons of explosives. So you have to double what the Germans did to London. And then
Yeah.
you have to multiply British bombed Dresden. It was only 3,900 tons of explosives. And that
Mm.
killed, of course, untold thousands. And it's a portion why we have the Geneva Convention. So, by any metric, right, this is obviously crimes against civilians, which we'll go into that more later. But yeah, I would say generally, I have deep sympathies for the people who are basically being forced to, either choose to die or live in exile yet again. That's my summary of this whole situation: is that Israel has pushed specifically the people in Gaza into an impossible position where it's either be exiled or die. That's it.
Reading this book, I've realized how history kind of just repeats itself in many ways. Like you said, the Hamas is pretty unwavering and uncompromising and in their demands. I mean, they truly just want it all back. But the thing is, that's just not going to happen. I mean, Israel is stronger. And
Right.
as sad as it is, I mean, when we're talking about the real world, I mean, might kind of does make right in some ways. I mean,
Well, it definitely makes, right?
obviously,
It might
oh
not
yes,
it
it
might
certainly
not make
makes.
right, but it might makes. That's for sure.
Oh yeah. I guess it doesn't do any good to just go back and say, if only they had accepted such and such uh, partition plan or resolution or but the reason I say it's funny that history repeats itself is during the Great Arab Revolt, like in the late 30s, so 1936 to 1939, the Palestinians were led, and this guy had the popular support of the Palestinians by this Mufti Hajj al Husseini, I believe was his name, and he wanted it again, just like Hamas. He wanted it all back, and I totally get it. I totally get it because by then Israel wasn't even a state in the late 30s, and there's just no way of getting it back, and it's just kind of
Yeah,
sad.
I would say the there is no room here for optimism, right? In terms of if you're a Palestinian and you care about innocent life and human rights and all that, if you care at all about any of that, there is no room for optimism here because the Palestinians, the most likely scenario is that they are going to be exiled yet again and completely out of this country or out of their country. Um, and the idea that they're going to be able to resist their way back to a 1967 or a 1948 border is just a non-starter. Um, there's no political will for that in America, I think is the reason why. If there was a political will in America, because I mean, at the end of the day, the U.S. is who funds a lot of this in terms of like the arming of Israel. We do a lot of that. Not that Israel doesn't have their own like weapons industry, but we fund a lot of this bombing and this genocide that is happening. And if there was a political will in America to stop that or come to an agreement and make these people get along, then maybe. But I got to be honest with you, I'm not really sure that that's even a possible solution right now, especially given who Trump has surrounded himself with now. If anything, I think the opposite is more likely true. The idea that they're going to expand the borders of Israel to include southern parts of Lebanon, Syria. I doubt if they go into Sinai or Jordan and potentially strikes on Iran. You know, who
Oh,
knows?
I agree. I mean, the people Trump has surrounded himself with in really key positions. I mean, Pete Hegseth, who's now in charge of the Pentagon. I mean, he has Crusader tattoo, a Deus Volt, and complete Christian Zionist. So I mean, he's totally, I mean, I don't know that the Israelis could have wished for someone better in that position.
Right.
And then Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, that's another one that incredibly pro-Israel, and I mean, it's just I imagine the Israelis are loving all these picks. So yeah, there is no will for it in America to change course and to make a two-state solution or and enforce it. And honestly, I feel as though that if a solution were ever to come about, it would have to be enforced by the US. I think we're probably the only ones who could really, pull and push on the levers of power to, bring we are the only ones who could ever bring Israel to heel. And we're the only ones that have the military might really to enforce a long-standing ceasefire between the two parties. There's just well, like you said, I mean, I just don't see any lane for that. And
Yeah, I mean, as everyone knows, I think at this point, on October 7th, 2023, there was a Hamas attack from Gaza into Israel proper. This included attacks on civilians, IDF soldiers. I think a total count is around 1,200 dead, mixed bag between civilians and combatants. And then a quick withdrawal back into Gaza by Hamas. I think they had over 250 hostages total.
I believe
Um,
that's correct. Yeah.
and I think some of them are still over there, right? Is that not
Oh
correct?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Quite a few are likely dead as well. So I don't
Sure.
know the exact, estimates, but yeah.
Sure. I guess this will be a good like segue. Do you have any comments on Israel's actions post October 7th? So, whether that be the blockade, whether that be anything, like, is there anything you want to say? Because I can go on like a giant rant about that. So
Well, I want to actually speak a little bit more on October 7th itself,
go
and
for it.
not to be far too conspiratorial, although this is a fairly mainstream opinion. I am of the opinion that Israel allowed this attack to happen so that they would have a pretext to go into Gaza and eventually annex it. But we're talking about one of the most sophisticated intelligence agencies in the world, the Mossad. The idea that they would allow this attack to happen, without any knowledge of it, and then let the civilians in these kibbutzim be just attacked for hours before troops arrived and fended off the attackers. The idea that they were able to do the damage they did uh, with as much time as Hamas had to kind of just almost freely move about. Uh, I find it preposterous. Uh, so
Yeah.
I think, and one more thing before I give it to you, I would strongly suggest that our listeners look up the Hannibal Directive, which
I
is
saw this.
where, yeah, so basically it was meant for uh, IDF troops that sometimes it would be better to kill an IDF troop that was taken hostage rather than potentially that IDF troop getting tortured and then revealing secrets and confidential information about the state of Israel. But instead of applying it to IDF troops in this case, I mean, there is evidence that perhaps the Hannibal Directive was used against Israeli citizens, and you can kind of see this in the aftermath of the damage. I mean, we saw cars almost completely blown up, honestly looking, and damage that is just so much more than you would expect from just a ragtag band of insurgents with Kalashnikovs, so
Right.
but that's kind of those are kind of my thoughts on October 7th, that basically this attack was allowed so that they could have a pretext for their bigger goal of eventually maybe attacking Iran and then annexing Gaza and perhaps even the leveraging all this into annexing the West Bank as well. But I've kind of monopolized it.
Yeah. I
So what are your
mean,
thoughts?
yeah, I don't entirely disagree, but I will say, I mean, I'm not fixed on that position as you are. To me it's irrelevant. Because whether Bibi Netanyahu and Mossad knew about it and let it happen, I understand that it doesn't change the fact that like it doesn't save any extra lives, like it doesn't it doesn't make a difference to me whether they knew about it and let it happen or if they were caught completely off guard. There's virtually no difference to me, but I do tend to lean in, like I'm supposed to believe that this organization has the intelligence to hack every phone on the planet through the Pegasus program, and they can blow up pagers in several countries away or across the Lebanese border, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't know about their single greatest enemy having several movements at once. Yeah, I at the very least it raises some eyebrows and makes me ask some questions like why were they so ill prepared, you know?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I'm in 100% agreement, but that is a fair point you made that I mean, ultimately if I,
I
if
will
our
say
leaders.
BB got what he wanted out of this.
Oh
Like
yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm sure that he saw this happen and was like, well, this is a tragedy and this is horrible, but like, they say a crisis is a hell of a thing to waste. Like, let's use it to basically do what we've been wanting to do in Gaza for the past, 20 years since he's been in politics in Israel.
Oh yeah. And people may forget because so much has transpired since then, but in 2023, before the events of October 7th, there were nationwide protests in Israel, calling for Bibi to step down or, be removed by some legal method. People were incredibly unhappy with him. So, this attack in some ways saved him politically. And, he has as of the current date, he has a somewhat tenuous coalition keeping him in power. There's some, I guess, far right troublemakers, but that want a whole lot that maybe he can or maybe he can't provide them. But yeah, as of right now, it seems to actually, at least for BB's political career, it seems to have helped him.
Yeah, yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I think it saved him in a lot of ways, and ultimately, I think it'll be what destroys his political career because I think that there is some sort of like public resentment towards BB for allowing this to happen or failure to have security on this.
Oh yes, oh yes.
As far as Israel's actions post October the 7th, though, I mean, there was nothing short of just unlawful disregard for human life. I mean, they basically like had this as like a pretext. Like they basically announced to the world, like, you didn't hold back after the events of 9/11. So that was, I mean, literally. I mean, you have defense ministers, members of BB's cabinet arguing for the complete extermination of like Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, he said Hamas and their families, which he is extending to the entire population of Gaza. I mean, it's just completely insane. I don't understand. So I guess let's start with this. This would be what do you think post October? What is BB's goal with Gaza? Like, what do you think his goal is right after October the 7th happens? What does BB Netanyahu want out of this next conflict?
In terms of the Palestinian territories, I just think he wants annexation, and I think he's going to get it.
Yeah, I think you're right. The question is, how is he going to get there? Right? I think the goal after this was to make Gaza unlivable.
Oh
Um,
yes, well, fair, yeah, fair point, and I think he's succeeded.
so let's
Uh,
let me just compare this. So like when Putin is attacking northern Ukraine, right?
mhm.
He's going out of his way not to just level the entire fucking country because he wants to rule over the country. he doesn't want to be king of the ashes because he wants the people in northern Ukraine to become Russians. You know what I mean? It's like
Oh yeah.
he's not
Oh yeah.
trying to ethnically cleanse a population. He's trying to incorporate a population into Russian society. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Benjamin
Yes.
Netanyahu, I don't think is doing that. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to ethnically cleanse a portion of land so that way his ethnicity can go in there and claim it. Um, just like they've done with the settler colonialism in the West Bank. For people who think that this is some far left Marxist postmodernist theory, let me just read this. This is from the United States State Department. This is a summary on Israeli human rights abuses. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in 2018, the Knesset passed the nation state law, which asserted the right to national self determination in Israel to be, quote, unique to the Jewish people. I mean, that by definition would be apartheid, right? Because you're
It
just
sounds like it.
right. And of course, in this summary, they talk about significant human rights abuses, including unlawful murder, arbitrary detention, um, radical discrimination. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and that's what the United States is willing to say. If the United States, as pro Israel as we are willing to be, I mean, the deeper diving of this, like I've got a UN report here, um, that basically all of accuses them of complete genocide. This is the amount of groups that have come out and said that, like, yeah, this meets the definition of a genocide. Um, the International Committee of the Red Cross, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the UN Special Council, the ICJ, Save the Children, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, Doctors Without. I mean, you could go on, Darren. Like the
Oh
amount.
yeah. Oh yeah.
What are the and that doesn't count all the individual nations that have come out and said that yes, what Israel's doing goes beyond our right to defend itself. Which I think you and I agree here. I mean, let's just get this out of the way. After October the 7th, Israel absolutely has a right to respond, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, just to maintain, deterrence and,
Sure.
legitimacy, basically, I mean, they kind of have to do something. Things would be kept proportionate, and maybe they, take out double the amount of people that were taken from them, or something. But this is just so beyond that,
See,
even.
go ahead,
Oh,
finish.
go on.
No,
Oh,
go ahead.
well, even, like you said earlier, we have this official estimate we've been fed of like 46,000, whatever. It's low 50s, mid 40s, something like that. Many people would say, I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, it's likely just many hundreds of thousands. And like, I'm getting this info from, there was this piece in the Lancet Medical Journal, and they gave an estimate of like something like 180,000. And they said, that actually might be a somewhat conservative estimate.
Yeah, that's what
Like, it
I've been
might
seeing too.
be much, much higher. And
Well,
all that to say,
even
oh, go
Trump,
on.
even Trump, not to cut you off, but even Trump, and whenever he was talking about it, he said, "Well, there's only 1.7 million left, which in the last census there was 2.2 million. So even through
Yeah.
Trump's numbers that he was told, they're estimating a 500,000 loss. But
Oh,
go on.
yeah. Well, I was gonna bring that up. I don't know if, perhaps I'm sure he has a much higher quality of information and statistics given to him. And so maybe that was kind of something I was thinking about. Maybe he let it slip a little that, the real toll is like 400, 500,000,
Right.
which, I mean, based on the devastation I've seen in pictures, where, you have all of northern Gaza reduced to rubble, and then, like, there are only a few, I guess, enclaves, I guess you could call them, in the South that are like kind of still look structurally sound. There's really not a lot
Yeah.
left. So I mean, to me, with all the destruction I've seen, and then the amount that they've been besieged, I mean, 500,000 seems totally plausible. I mean, starvation alone, I'm sure, it's taken out many, many thousands. So,
Well, and and I don't understand why people try to fight the number as if they wouldn't defend it anyways. If God himself came down from the heavens and told us 500,000 Palestinians had died in Gaza, they would just be like, well, Israel does have a right to defend itself. So, I mean, I just don't understand how you can argue with people with that kind of mindset. The people who are going to go out of their way to defend these actions no matter what, it seems like these facts don't matter, but it's almost like, well, what are you gonna do? You know? Um, because at the end of the day, like, what is their number? Like, what is too far? you know?
oh yeah, oh yeah. Like,
And
when would it be enough? And I don't think they have a limit.
so I guess before I get into this next portion that I wanted to go over, I just wanted to kind of do this as like a caveat or like a precursor to what I'm saying. So I'm about to name off a bunch of extremely specific examples, as well as like general stats. And I don't want the audience to be confused by this and think that, well, every army has a couple of bad apples. Surely, a couple of soldiers just kind of took the opportunity in the chaos and did some crazy shit, right? Every army has that. I don't want you to be confused and think that is the case because, well, there's simply way too much evidence to the contrary of this. There's actually not many international bodies that would call what Israel is doing, specifically like IDF soldiers, like crimes against humanity, war crimes, and all that. But just to kind of go over some really quick data points, the devastation is so bad that 90% of Gaza's water is considered undrinkable because they've bombed all the water sanitation facilities. It's also blockaded, so that technically makes it an open air prison where there's no food, there's no water, there's no fuel coming in. The UN trucks, they can't go in. And like Darren said, like the 46,000 confirmed dead is way lower than the likely hundreds of thousands of people that are actually dead, right? 90% of the population of Gaza is completely displaced. They're not, they're just migrating from bomb shelter to bomb shelter to bomb shelter. They're bombing hospitals. This is a crazy one. Darren, you tell me if you remember this or not, but they got caught on camera raping Palestinian detainees.
Oh yes, I remember this. In fact, I saw the video. I mean, and it's from a distance, so you can't see anything too explicit, but I mean, you certainly can understand what's going on. I mean, there's a giant crowd of them, and they they're basically surrounding this guy. It's just terrible.
And remember, the outcry within Israel was not that these soldiers had went rogue and raped a prisoner. The outcry was that they were trying to hold the rapist criminally accountable. And they argued for the right to rape. I swear
Yeah.
to God, you can't make this shit up. They
Oh
argued
yeah, yeah.
for the
I mean,
right,
it shocked me that they were just so open about their desire
and
to have these guys not be prosecuted. I mean,
it
just insane.
it really it just kind of shows you like how far the goalposts are moving because originally it was like so Israel would bomb a hospital you know back when there were hospitals in Gaza and the people defending it here in America would go like it's just crazy how the goalposts have shifted to like well at first it was like well they didn't bomb the hospital and then oh they did bomb the hospital we have a video of it oh well It was harboring terrorists. Oh, it actually wasn't harboring. Well, Israel has a right to defend itself. Casualty of one. It's. I mean, for God's sakes, this is the one that I found the most disturbing. There was obviously a New York Times article by a doctor who was in Gaza, and he was reporting several children headshot wounds. And he's like, "What's going on?" And then he thought he was alone. Maybe he was in a bad. He assumed it was a single sniper for the IDF, right?
Hmm.
And then he talked to another doctor that was in Rafah. Um, and he told him, he's like, God, I don't know if you saw what I saw, but I saw some crazy shit. And the doctor was like, I saw the exact same thing. And then they started asking around. And as it turns out, you know, an unspeakable amount of children are getting shot in the head with snipers. I mean, how do you justify a sniper shot to the head? They have X-rays, and I'll pull them up right now. I've got a screenshot for the listeners. Um, you can't deny this. Like, we have X-rays with bullets still in their head. You can't blame this as they were trying to kill Hamas, right? You know,
Oh yeah.
but people will. I mean, like I said, when you're dealing with people who are just ideologically committed to defending these actions, then that's just what they're going to do. I mean, there's nothing, unfortunately, nothing that they can do to even admit that, okay, that was a little fucked up. That was a
Oh
little
yeah.
fucked up. Is there any other actions that you wanted to like highlight, or if not, I'll just wrap up with this UN report, and then we can move on to the future, which I'm sure is like the spicy part of the topic.
Um, none to me. Those were some of my the most memorable ones to me, especially the gang rape, which was videoed. It really just kind of speaks to how far gone the population, the general population of the Israelis have become. I mean, they really have become bloodthirsty, and I mean they want their revenge. I mean, on a level, it's understandable, but it's scary to think about how perhaps even unstable that population is right now. But go ahead and read off that UN report. Or yeah, I'm interested to hear.
Yeah, so this was in November of 2024, shortly after the 1 year anniversary. Um, so obviously they've got a year's worth of data to collect on this, and I'll just go ahead and read off some of the big ones. They considered Israel's warfare in Gaza consistent with the characteristics of genocide.
Yeah.
Um, Really quick, would you consider what's happening right now a genocide?
I would just based off. I mean,
If this
I don't
isn't
know what the
genocide,
high-minded like technical. I couldn't give
I'm
you.
glad you asked about that. Here's the UN's definition of
Okay.
genocide: acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, based off that definition alone, I would assume it is. I mean, I would characterize it as such.
Sure. Yeah, I'd agree. And I guess my bigger point is, if what we're seeing in Gaza is not genocide, then I mean, for God's, what is, like what
Oh
qualifies
yeah.
if not this? But
And it's such a small population as well that, taking out 500,000, you know, there's only 2 million in the Gaza Strip, and then Palestinians worldwide, there's only a few million total. I mean, so.
I guess to wrap up, and this will be the last thing I say, and then I'll let you go over like your thoughts on like the atrocities and whatnot. I view that there is a total like lack of due diligence to innocent life here, because they have a total disregard, and they at the end of the day, like they understand, I think, very well that no one is going to stop what they're doing. There is going to be no accountability for anything that they do, no matter how bad. And so they're just like, like why not? I mean, how else do you explain the indiscriminate bombings, the where there's not even a lot of great evidence that they've been able to root out Hamas. I mean, like when you look at what Gaza looks like versus like when the Hamas, like, because they're talking about these tunnels that they're basically living in. They walk out and they're basically in fresh clothes. So how can Hamas look totally fine? Which again, not a defender of Hamas, but like I would be fine if they were sending in special forces and killing every single person involved in that attack on October the 7th. But the problem is that when you've got a 9-year-old with two bullets in her head, I think that I think I have a justification to be pissed off at your actions. You know.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Would Palestinians have the right to return to Gaza if they left while the rebuilding was
It
happening?
would be my hope that we could do something really nice, really good, where they wouldn't want to return. Why would they want to return? The place has been hell. It's been one of the meanest, toughest places on earth. And right now, I've seen every picture from every angle, better than if I were there. And nobody can live there. You can't live there. So if we can build them through massive amounts of money supplied by other people, very rich nations, and they're willing to supply it. If we can build something for them in one of the countries, and it could be Jordan, and it could be Egypt, it could be other countries, and you could build 4 or 5 or 6 areas. It doesn't have to be one area, but you take certain areas and you build really good quality housing, like a beautiful town, like someplace where they can live and not die. Because Gaza is a guarantee that they're going to end up dying. The same thing's going to happen again. It's happened over and over again, and it's going to happen again as sure as you're standing there, Peter. So I hope that we could do something where they wouldn't want to go back. Who would want to go back? They've experienced nothing but death and destruction.
All right, so that's the clip. I guess this plan was really only known by Trump because when questioned about it afterwards, Marco Rubio, he didn't know about it. Pete Hegseth, he didn't know about it. Took them both by surprise. And you would think, of the cabinet members, they would probably be some of the ones that would like to know.
Susie
And
Wiles had a look on her face, the chief of staff, like she didn't know about it either. She looked at him like, what the hell is going on?
oh yeah, and and some people speculate looking at Bibi that perhaps even he did not know, and I can't quite tell. There's this whole pseudoscience of body language and you know taking someone's expression and extrapolating it into, oh, they must be thinking this. I don't know. I mean, I it's
Who's to
possible
say?
that, yeah, who's to say? Uh, with all that being said, I guess I'll just start off. I mean, I think it's a terrible. You know what? Before I give my opinion on it, do I think Trump is 100% serious? And there's a spectrum. Some people say yes, he's 100% serious, and it's a plan that's been in the works. I have mixed feelings. I'm thinking perhaps there's a 20 to 30% chance he's serious. 70 to 80% of me is like, well, if this isn't just some bizarre apprentice, art of the deal level, like negotiating tactic where he just throws out some insane offer, which I guess is comparable to, I guess, an extreme low ball, perhaps, in some ways. if this isn't just some kind of business world tactic put into the realm of foreign policy, I would be surprised. I mean, because in my reason for thinking this, I mean, he didn't let any. It doesn't appear that he let anyone else know of what he was going to say behind that podium. And I would assume, even with as erratic or eccentric, I guess, that as Trump is, that if this were truly a serious plan, that surely other people would know about it other than him. But what are your thoughts? Why, before we give our opinion on the plan itself, do you think Trump is serious or not serious?
Dude, I've seen Trump do this too many times. This is you. I mean, you said it best whenever you said an art of the deal, business type negotiation tactic. Like he's 100%. Like if you think that the United States is going to end up owning a portion of Gaza, I just don't know what to tell you. Number one, his cabinet members won't go for this. I mean, he's surrounded himself with hardcore Zionists who, according to them, that land belongs to the nation of Israel. So the idea that they're not, even if Trump was serious, the idea that they wouldn't undermine this, make it a total shit show, make him spend political capital just so that way he could make enough of a mess and be like, all right, fuck it. I don't want to deal with this mess anymore. I'm just going to give it to Israel anyway. Like, I guess my point is that, like, even if Trump is serious, there's no way that they're going to allow him to have it. The people around him are definitely going to push him to let Benjamin Netanyahu annex it, which is, I think, ultimately what's going to happen. If I was betting,
That would be
but
my bet as well.
there is a clip, and I'm going to play the clip right after this. But there is a clip that Trump is committed to this plan.
I'm committed to buying and owning Gaza. As far as us rebuilding it, we may give it to other states in the Middle East to build sections of it. Other people may do it through our auspices. But we're committed to owning it, taking it, and making sure that Hamas doesn't move back. There's nothing to move back into. The place is a demolition site. It'll be, the remainder will be demolished. Everything's demolished. I mean, you can't live in those buildings right now. They're very unsafe. But we'll make it into a very good site for future.
I think we need to reiterate what the President of the United States just said, and you said it, but it bears repeating. He just said that it will be United States policy to forcibly displace 2 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip. That is ethnic cleansing by another name. He said the United States would then own the Gaza Strip and that we would develop the Gaza Strip and that other countries would take these Palestinians. He says he's talked to a lot of people and they think it's a great idea. Well, we know that just a few weeks ago, the Arab countries, key Arab countries, had an emergency meeting and responded forcefully against this idea and said it was unacceptable. So what the president is doing here is really throwing a match on an already very volatile region.
He says that he's committed to this plan, and it's in the same clip where he said that there's no right to return for the Palestinians that leave.
Beautiful communities for the 1.9 million people. We'll build beautiful communities, safe communities. Could be 5, 6, could be 2, but we'll build safe communities a little bit away from where they are, where all of this danger is. In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
Spent. No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing, much better. In other words, I'm talking about building a permanent place for them. Because if they have to return now, it'll be years before you could have it's not habitable. It will be years before it could happen. I'm talking about starting to build, and I think I could make a deal with Jordan. I think I could make a deal with Egypt. We give them billions and billions of dollars a year.
Yeah, I don't know if this is something that he's dead set on, but for sure he's going to use this as a negotiation tool with Israel. And I'm not sure to what end. Like what is he going to ask of them to give? This is the part I guess I don't understand. But I guess let me ask you this: assuming that he was serious, would you be okay with U.S. rule of Gaza?
No, I think it's a uniquely bad idea.
Yeah, me too, dude.
Uh,
Me fucking too.
well, I mean, I guess I can go into why it's just terrible before I even, go into what, charities I might give this plan. But, well, for one thing, for his own sake, why would he put U.S. troops on the ground where inevitably some Hamas soldier or Islamic Jihad member will, you know, snipe them from the debris of a demolished building? The potential casualties of American soldiers would be so high.
Darren, he's not. Didn't you listen to him? He's not going to put U.S. troops on the ground. They're not going to be necessary. My
So
God,
true. So true. You're
you're not
right. You're
even
right.
paying
Shame
fucking
on me.
attention, man. You're not even
Shame
paying
on me.
attention.
But not only that, I mean, if we were to really clean out the place of these Palestinians and then I guess foist them upon the Egyptians and the Jordanians, which seem to be the people that Trump wants to send them to the most, I mean, that would be, I mean, that's just such a non starter for these states. And, we bribe these states into being buddy buddy with Israel by giving them, billions a year. Egypt is the country with the second largest foreign aid received from the U.S. per year. And that's really just bribe money to get along with Israel. I mean, there's no amount of money that we could give them where they would absorb however many, like a million Palestinians each. I don't know. I mean, for one thing, their populations, which are more radical than the leaders of the government themselves, would see them as, in some ways complicit in the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. If they took these people in, it would mess up their legitimacy. And these states have had issues with Palestinians in the past. I mean,
Right.
Jordan in particular. I mean, I forget what year it was, but it was one of their kings, King Abdullah, was assassinated by a follower of that Mufti I mentioned earlier
Mm-hmm.
in the podcast, Hajj al Husseini. Quite a bit, and Egypt actually has a kind of a storied history with the Palestinian population that they have absorbed in the past. So neither of these states is too keen on taking more of these people, who would certainly be destabilizing and who would also be demographically just incredibly. It would change things quite a bit because these states don't have huge populations. Egypt's a little bit larger, but Jordan is not a particularly populous state. So I mean, to thrust like a million or however many Palestinians into there would be just so straining on their resources. It's just a non-starter for all of these
Yeah,
states.
it's as much of a non-starter as if they wanted to ship them, north and become Israeli citizens. Like
Oh yeah.
it's just not going to happen for the same, well, I shouldn't say for the same reason, for the same distaste. They will not because to the Arab League and the surrounding nations, it's basically like you're ethnically cleansing the Palestinians about what is the most important to them, which is their land, you know?
Oh yeah.
Um, and not just that, I think it would cause a unique amount of problems. Like the Arab League would have a problem with it for obvious reasons because they're going to have to be the ones to take in these people who have been exiled. And then, the axis of resistance with Iran and Iraq, and they're not going to like any of this. And then, I mean, what the fuck is Europe going to do? Or China, or, I mean, they're not going to have like action against the United States, right? But they will look at this like, ooh, they are completely, I mean, you've already seen messages from France, Germany, and Ireland, and everywhere being like, yeah, this is a horrible idea and we do not condone it, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, how much political capital is Trump willing to expend just to serve Israel's interests? I mean, truly, and this is, you know,
Perhaps,
I didn't I didn't vote for either in this past election, as you know. But my thoughts going into it were that, as far as bad outcomes could go, I thought, there's a chance it gets a little worse, but that it doesn't get. I never fathomed this. This never crossed my mind as a possibility. I, from, I mean, this is just insane. I can't believe this is even being discussed.
yeah, it permanently would set issues for us in the Middle East going forward. And God knows how much we're going to have to spend just to secure it.
Oh yeah.
Forget about exiling them, forget about cleaning up the rubble, forget about, and however, if we started tomorrow, it would take anywhere from 5 to 15 years just to get rid of the rubble. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're not building in the next decade. You're not even starting like his little, hotel casino shit for during his term. Like, this is all ridiculous, and the fact that it's being taken seriously, I think it just shows that, a lack of critical thinking on people. The fact that people are, I mean, think about it for 2 fucking seconds, and obviously this is a bad idea.
I have my fantasy set of, events that could transpire, that could set everything right, which are never going to happen. But this is something I have been thinking of, though. And don't get me wrong, I think for U.S. interests, this is one of the worst things we could ever do.
Okay.
And I'm primarily concerned, with the U.S. interests because I try to look at things through a amoral lens sometimes when it comes to foreign policy to an extent. But looking at the humanity side of it, I will say if I'm being totally, totally charitable and generous to Trump's bizarre plan he's drawn up, wouldn't in some ways just forcing them to leave be better than restarting the hostilities and just letting this conflict wage on? Because it feels like if the ceasefire does not hold, which I don't think it will, it feels like this is just going to happen again. And so we're going to see however many 100,000 more people dead. And it's kind of like you were saying earlier in the podcast. It's like, there are a lot of hardliners, and for good reason, because I mean, I've met people, my great grandma, I mean, she passed in 2019, but she was over 20 years older than the state of Israel. So, I mean, the memories of all these people are very fresh. So it's totally understandable to be a hardliner and want to stay and want to have it all back. But at some point, well, Israel isn't going anywhere. So are we just going to let these people? I mean, in some ways, in some ways, even though it would be terrible for us, from a humanitarian perspective, it almost seems like the best out of a series of bad options to just be like, you people just got to leave, because if you stay, Netanyahu
Well,
is going to kill you. And I get that, we are complicit in that because we're not willing to put pressure on him to stop him. But I'm just looking at it from where everything stands now, and there's nobody in the U.S. that's going to stop the dude. There.
yeah, listen, in an ideal world, like you're saying, well, I will say let's add a hint of pragmatism in there. I don't think that would involve them leaving and being exiled. So basically, what you're saying, right, is that like it's almost mercy to let these people become citizens, like in Jordan or in Israel, or not in Israel, in Egypt or Saudi Arabia, right? Is that what you're
Oh
saying?
yeah, and heck, I think even we could. I am against mass migration for a host of reasons, but I mean, just the fact that I think we're, we are complicit in this tragedy. I would be willing to take a huge number of these people, like 500,000 plus. Honestly, like
In
honestly.
America?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Well, that you want to talk about not happening? Not a fucking chance,
oh
son.
yeah.
And
There's not a chance.
I share your sympathies, and I would gladly take these people in. But the fact is, like, I know who's in power, and I know their lack of sympathy that they have, and there's not a fucking chance that they're gonna let any of these people become American refugees.
Oh yeah, oh
Not
yeah.
a chance. Even though they could definitely claim asylum. Like if they don't meet asylum, who does? You know?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. They have more. They have more of a case for it than probably anyone else on Earth. I mean,
I don't really disagree with a lot of what you said in terms of like, would this be mercy to let them go? And because and I do think Trump has a slight point, which is hey, why would you want to stay? Um,
yeah.
but ultimately, I think you got to think. I think what would be best is if you let the Palestinians have the choice. If you want to stay and you want to hold to your land, which the majority of them I think will, because you're talking about an ideology where that land is sacred, um,
Oh yeah.
just like the Jewish people of Israel think that that land is sacred to them, and I don't deny that their ideological views are true to them. You're not going to get these people to split from that.
If Jews born in Brooklyn have a right to a state in Palestine, then Palestinians born in Jerusalem have a right to a state in Palestine. Anyone who doesn't agree with that principle, I think, is suspect.
I think most people do.
They do, but but why in that case do we have the one and not the other? After all, it's America that pays for all this and arms the Israelis. And
I think forcing them out is a uniquely bad idea. I mean, essentially, what you're arguing for is the Indian removal in the modern century. Like, it's just, it's a horrible idea, and I don't think history will look kindly on it either.
Well,
If Palestinians chose it, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it, but I don't think that they will, and I think that you don't think that they will either.
yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I have my like ideal set of events that I would like to transpire. I would like us to, you know, I would have liked Trump to have Netanyahu arrested while he was at the podium on live TV and send him to the International Criminal Court, or or something. But I would like for there to be even just a simulacrum of Palestinian self-determination. But it just feels as though, kind of like I said earlier, like it feels as though Israel has just won. As unfortunate for the Palestinians as it is. And
Well, I mean, I don't deny that, right? I think that my point that I'm saying is that like just because they won does I mean they're still, let's say that the low number is right, 1.6 million people minimum there. That I mean that's still a ton of people. And
oh
the
yeah,
idea that
oh
you're going
yeah,
to ethnically cleanse that many people is just absurd to me. The idea that that the American people I don't think will go for that. Um I would be totally shocked, especially some level, if we're going to carry out the operation, there will be some level of press allowed because I'm sure you're aware, but Israel is not allowing press as much as they can anywhere near Gaza because,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Israel's like, we will kill you if you're in a building that happens to be anywhere near a Hamas terrorist in the last, 20 years. Like, but if the US is there, they're going to allow footage of this stuff and they're going to allow pictures and there's not a chance the American people go for it.
Well, I think honestly, funny enough, I think if reporters were allowed in there, I mean, in it, if the American media reported on it, I think Americans would be shocked to find that the Palestinians are in many ways pretty similar. I mean, there's certainly differences, but it's not like they're super different looking. I mean, they certainly have these Levantine, air and also like Arabish qualities to the way they look, and but I mean culturally, they're all very well. Many of them are very well educated. Many Americans would find them kind of relatable. So I mean, in some ways, I feel like if people just had the ability to, I mean, the ability to see it, I think opinions would just change so quick.
Right. Like
And
imagine if, similar to COVID, if every single night you turned on the TV and it was COVID numbers, COVID numbers, COVID numbers. Imagine if it was uh pictures that they had taken that day of the occupation or the removal or the potential removal, I should say. I think that would sway public support dramatically. As a matter of fact, and we'll round off on this before switching to another topic, but support for Israel as a whole has definitely gone down. I'll just rattle off these numbers and then we'll get your take and my take on it. But as far as a percent of people who say Israel has gone too far, that number is up 4%, and that's the biggest category right now.
oh wow, what's
Um,
the total?
what's up?
What's that total then? If it's up four
Yeah, so 31% of people polled.
in
And that's
America?
yeah, and that was yeah, in America.
Oh wow, that's kind of honestly, that's really impressive for America. I mean, it's lower than what I want, but
Yeah.
I would hope that it would be close to 100. But
Yeah,
I
the
mean, but the I mean the level that the American public has been propagandized. I mean, it's I mean you went through the public school system, so I mean, like I did, so
yeah.
I mean you know how deep the
And
subversion.
it's definitely more negative among our generation, like younger people. As a matter of fact, it's almost 50-50 among in terms of like blatantly against what they're doing versus like the mix of undecided, just right and not far enough combines for the other 50.
Oh
So,
wow.
um, yeah. And every other category is down. The only category that has increased is the gone too far position. The just right position is down 5% to 20%. And
Dang.
then not far enough is down 4%. It's only 12% of Americans think that Israel hasn't gone far enough, which is, I need to meet these people and show them some photographs. So I guess just to kind of, wrap up here, and as we gather our thoughts for the audience, if you've made it this far, what do you think is your outlook for the region as a whole? Like whether that involves like potential implications with Iran, maybe relations with Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Jordan. Like, how do you see this panning out?
I think Iran is the goal. for Netanyahu. I think he wants the U.S. to greenlight strikes on their nuclear facilities or perhaps, their infrastructure, or what, perhaps their oil. I think Netanyahu does want to attack and destabilize Iran. I think because once Iran is gone, there will be no one in the region left to oppose them.
Correct.
Egypt and Jordan have been bribed. Saudi Arabia, I mean, it's not normalized, but, them and the Arab Gulf states, they all get along fairly okay with Israel. I mean, Iraq is no longer, it can't put up a fight anymore. Syria just got taken over by that guy who was the leader of HTS, Al Jalani,
Hmm.
and Israel, which as much as I oppose Israel for, America first type reasons, I mean, I respect that they just totally wiped out all of Syria's serious military capabilities. Like, I don't think they have a plane left in Syria anymore. So,
Right.
uh, upon Bashar al-Assad's ousting, so I do respect them for that. So Syria's been neutralized effectively. And I guess Hezbollah have been all pagered and bombed to death. So I don't even know that they could quite put up a fight against Israel. And, the land barrier between Hezbollah and Iran, so, Syria, that's been cut off now that Al Jalani's in charge. So, you know, there's really, it's going to be much harder for Iran to, supply these uh, little proxy forces with arms and, aid of any kind. Yeah, I think I hope not. I hope not. But if things keep going as they've been going, I can foresee actions against Iran being taken. You know, maybe there will be a blunder or two along the way. Like if Trump keeps pushing for the Gazans to be relocated to Jordan and Egypt, this is just, as we've said, such a non-starter for these states that maybe that would kind of change the calculus in their mind. Maybe that would push them away from us. And maybe, I mean, I think the king of Jordan, he was like, if these Palestinians get pushed on, I would rather go to war with Israel. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I totally get it. But what do you foresee for the future of the region?
Like I said throughout this podcast, I think it's incredibly unlikely that Netanyahu decided to level this place, push these people out as much as they can, and now they're considering having the US do it for them. They didn't do all that just to not control Gaza. So
Yeah.
he's going to strike whatever deal he has to with the president, and he's going to end up controlling Gaza. That's just the way it is, and I don't think that there's room for optimism here. I really don't. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't make sense to me either. I think you're right about Iran. I think that Netanyahu, I mean, that is like his big fish. That is what he wants. And to the extent that people think he's overplaying his hand, like many of the leftists think that he's overplaying his hand, I really don't think so, dude. there's not an election in the United States for 2 years because really, it's not like Israel's going to hold him accountable. It's not like the ICC is going to hold him accountable because they can't get him arrested.
Oh
So
yeah.
as long as he can't be arrested, and as long as Trump is willing to let him go for these strikes, like you said, on their nuclear facilities, on their infrastructure, on their oil, why would he not? you know, and I'm sure you saw this too. I don't know why I'm thinking of the number 71 billion, but they just signed an arms deal with Israel.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I
What's
think that number is accurate, or at least very close. I seem to remember 70 or so billion
the
worth of
idea?
equipment.
The idea that like this is all replenishment, I think, is just bullshit. Number one, they didn't lose equipment; they just used ammunition. You know, for the most part. Um, they're preparing, I think, for a large scale conflict, or at least the potential to respond to such a conflict. And I am worried what this will do to our allies. The only options I see for this not to lead to a war with Iran or the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in not just Gaza, but in the West Bank, in what's left of the Golan Heights, like, the Israeli settlements and whatnot. They'll completely ethnically cleanse those areas too if we don't stop them. And the only way we will is if there's unbelievable public support for the lives of the Palestinians, which I don't know if I foresee. Or the other option is practically unanimous international support. And I mean unanimous. I mean Britain, China, Russia, Germany, South Africa, Spain, Portugal, like all the countries in the world have to speak in unison against us. And I don't know if I see that happening either. Because at the end of the day, like, what are they going to do that's going to stop us? And I think Trump, that might have worked against a Biden or a Kamala if they care, because they care about international relations, but I don't think Trump does at all. I think you're better off going after U.S. public support because I think that's what he cares about more than anything.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think he does care about being liked enough that if he saw a significant downturn in his approval rating, that maybe there. But I mean, as of right now, his approval rating is actually positive. So
Yeah, and there will always be a contingent of evangelicals that are happy that he's doing this. So I
oh yeah,
don't I don't see that. So like a good, I mean, I'd hate to spit a number on it, but I'd probably be willing to bet at least 20% of this country is in
that would be
come
my estimate.
they are in complete support of ethnically cleansing Gaza, completely in support of that. For whatever reason, whether it's their end times theologians or um, they just are hardcore Zionists and they think all that land ought to be Israel's, whatever. Um, but yeah, I am not fucking optimistic to tell you the truth. Um, but here's the fucking kicker, Darren. Can I tell you the kicker? I don't,
What?
I don't, I don't think if Harris would have won, I think the only difference between that and this administration would be that, they're not, you know, we're not going to own Gaza. We're just going to let Israel own Gaza, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
okay. Um,
yeah. I tend to agree. I don't think all these. It kind of upsets me somewhat when I see liberals saying, "Oh, I bet you left." I mean, I'm not a leftist, but all you leftists, you should have voted for Kamala. I'm like, I will concede that maybe in some ways it might be ever so slightly better under Kamala for Palestinians, but in other ways, maybe not. I mean, if it were Kamala that won, one could argue that maybe this ceasefire deal, this which is sure to end soon, maybe that would never have even been reached,
right.
and things would have just continued on. And to stick up for the leftists a little, uh, the whole thing about extracting concessions is that, if you don't make it clear that your vote is not, a guarantee, then you can't compel the candidate in question to do anything if they can always count on your vote.
Dude, so here's the problem, Darren, is that if you're right, then what the Democratic Party should be doing is they should be moving further left in against support for Israel. But I mean, Hakeem Jeffries, right, the minority
Mm-hmm.
House leader, he he came out and he said, "Are you kidding me? Things are great in the Middle East. Iran's at its weakest moment, and Syria's been toppled." And he said, "This is our chance." They're going in the complete opposite direction of and again, leave
It's
it
so disheartening because
leave it to a Democrat to fuck it up, because Jesus.
I know it's one of those things, and to me, like, the answer for the Democrats to be winners again is so simple, but because I could say, like, if they would just pull back on the odd cultural stuff, if they would embrace some of the, I guess more Sanders-esque economic policies, and if they would just take stand, even nothing even that crazy, if they would just be willing to apply real pressure upon Israel, they would easily, I mean, they would get all the votes. And but there's just something, and part of it is incentives, there are almost just as many Democrats that are, that receive money from Israeli activist, lobbyists.
Right.
Uh, and then, as far as the economics goes, I mean, so many of them are backed by billionaires as well. Maybe no one quite as rich as Elon Musk, but billionaires nonetheless. Uh, so I mean, I guess there's really just no incentive for them in their own personal careers to go down that path. But I mean, for from the outside looking in, the answer is just so obvious. So they could win so easily just by doing all that, but they won't.
Yeah. And just to kind of wrap up, and these will be my last thoughts, and then I'll give you the last word. And for most of the 20th century, there was a decades long war between the British Empire and Northern Ireland. And they tried everything, man. They tried to get the king involved. They tried to get the Archbishop of Canterbury involved. They tried to get everyone they possibly could to stop this decades long fighting. And eventually, what happened is, new leaders rose up on both sides and they agreed that peace was the number one thing that they wanted. And I got to say, in this situation, I do not see that. I see nothing but resentment and at least not yet. you know. So I'm, like I said throughout the duration of this podcast, not optimistic. Um, but I will say, like, the one thing that I think that the Democrats should oppose the most over the next several months or years as the Trump administration pushes their policy on this is the ethnic cleansing of Gaza must be a non-starter for Democrats. You must oppose the idea of displacing over 2 million people. 50% of those people are under the age of 18. So you're talking roughly 800,000 children being forced from their homes. So I'll kick it over to you for your last thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. If the Democrats want a future, they're going to have to take a moral stand on this. And if not a moral one, then at least a pragmatic one. Like, it's not in America's interest, but also, like you were saying, I agree. I don't think I foresee any peaceful resolution to this anytime soon. And uh, I mean, I hope not, but I I think even with probably the safest options, there's going to be a lot more bloodshed. So those are kind of my closing thoughts, I guess. Nothing
sure.
too profound. I mean, it's
Well,
just kind of what it is.
I look forward to watching this play out. I'm sure we'll do another episode over this, so
Oh yeah,
should
oh yeah,
be should be great. Well, thanks for listening,
100%.
guys.
Oh yeah, thank you for listening.